Grapeviners, welcome back to another Future of Work weekly report. This is where we cover the current events and trends happening in the future of work. Today is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be similar in the sense we are going to review articles, but it's going to be different in the sense that we most likely will only review one article, and that is the one that we're going to be starting with today. If there is time, we will continue to the next article. We have two in the vault. If not, we'll try to incorporate them in another video or in next week's Future of Work weekly report. Before we get started, go ahead and smash that like button so we can continue to rank up in the algorithms and push forward and pioneer the future of work together. And if you aren't subscribed, please go ahead and do that. We are on a mission to get to 500 subscribers. Last quarter, our goal was 500 subscribers. We got to 400, so we're only 100 away. And lastly, the last request that I'll do for you today is if you know somebody that is passionate about work, specifically flexible and hybrid and remote work, go ahead and share this video and tell them about the Future of Work weekly report or our podcast, Untangled Vines, Redefining the Rules of Work, where we interview and share insights with experts on the future of work and how we can all prepare for what's going to undeniably be the future of work, which is flexible and remote. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the first and maybe the only article for today. What is it? Where is it coming from? The title is 10 Undeniable Benefits of Working from Home According to Science. So we're going to be talking about a lot of statistics here, not in a boring way, just in the sense of this is what it is. And the source is HuffPost or Huffington Post. The original date that this was published was April 5th, 2024. So let's go ahead and dive into it because there's 10 bullet points or highlights that we're going to be talking about in this article. So highlight number 1, remote and hybrid work options help employees balance work and personal life. So some of the stats here, or one of the stats, among hybrid workers who are not self-employed, 71% say working from home at least partially helps them balance their work and professional lives. And this is coming from Pew Research, P-E-W Research Survey. So that's bullet point 1. I'm going to go through these and see if we can tie them together in some senses. And then in other senses, we'll be talking about them individually. So highlight number 2, remote work significantly reduces carbon emissions. So people who work remotely all the time produce less than half the greenhouse gas emissions of on-site employees, according to the research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And that's important because by 2025, the majority of the workforce is going to be Generation Z and millennials. Now, we already know that Generation Z or Gen Zers really have a focus on improving and bettering the environment. In fact, they're probably frustrated with not necessarily millennials, but the generation above about how we handled the environment. And we are trying to correct that appropriately. And one of the best ways that we can do that is by offering flexibility in our work. A better way is 100% remote, but that doesn't tie into all of the different types of personalities included in the workforce. But this is one of the ways that we could think about. Now, if we think about this in the past, like pre-pandemic, some of the ways that we talked about reducing the greenhouse gases were carpooling to work, right? We never thought about remote work being the actual thing that could help us. But whenever we look at the article, they're talking about you can actually reduce your greenhouse gas or carbon emissions by half if you offer remote or in the slightest or at the least the ability to work flexibly. So those are some things to think about as a company, right? This is not only a marketing stick, it's not only good for the environment, but it also helps you get up and coming people who are coming into the workforce, right? Compared to a company that isn't focused on or cares about the environment, they're going to most likely go with you, someone who does care about the environment. Not only that, but also you're adding flexibility to the mix, which is, as we'll see in this article, a benefit for well-being. So highlight number 3, remote workers tend to eat healthier, but it can also lead to unhealthy habits. So this is what I'm talking about in the article, where we're going to be talking about the good things, but we're also going to be talking about some of the things that could slide into unhealthy habits or statistics that don't necessarily benefit remote work. So one of the call outs here is remote workers tend to feel lower rates of stress, which is good. They eat healthier meals and have lower blood pressure. However, studies have shown that remote workers also tend to drink and smoke more. Now, with a lot of these articles, there's often more questions than answers. And so whenever we see a call out like this, my question becomes, why? Right? Is it because they need to take breaks and maybe a smoke session or a step outside and have a cigarette or whatever they're smoking? Does that help break up the day? Or it just asks a lot of why, right? And so this is the contradiction of this article, which they blatantly call out. It's not like they're trying to hide and say remote workers eat healthier, but then there's also unhealthy habits. They're not trying to hide that. They're calling that out. And so my question would be why that is. I think maybe it's because you might have more time on your hands. You might not be interacting with as many people in the way that you did in the actual office setting. So we think with our platform Grapevine, by having the virtual break room, by having the community feed, and then also by having different elements come into the platform throughout the day, maybe that could help them stay consistent on healthy habits. But I do think that sometimes it could be the blending of where you work is where you also eat. It's where you also drink. It's where you also smoke if you smoke. Those kind of things can kind of blend together if you don't set your own boundaries, right? So as we talked about last week with leaders needing to be educated and trained and enabled on how to be a remote leader or a hybrid leader, I think we also have to take into consideration the training and enablement of remote employees. Even if they've worked remotely, they might not know the latest or the newest strategies for becoming a better remote worker, right? And so those are some of the things that we need to think about. This is a good segue into highlight number 4, because it's talking specifically about these boundaries, which is highlight number 4, remote workers or remote employees work longer hours compared to in-office workers. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean what you might think it means at the surface level, so let's dive into it. Remote workers tend to work longer hours, with their work often bleeding into evenings and weekends. According to a British study interpreting over 1,930 academic papers on teleworking and hybrid work arrangements, that's the number, or that's what they were able to report. But I did read highlight number 5, which is remote work saves commuting time, allowing for more time spent on work. So I would like to see the ratio of how much time is actually being spent in the evening or on the weekends to work versus they're just able to work more because they're commuting less or not at all. The other thing that we want to think about is the work on the weekends. Is that their choice, or is that their employer's choice? Or is that something that they felt like they had to do because they were distracted during the week? There's a lot of different variables that we should be asking ourselves whenever it comes to this specific call out. But some of the bullet points on remote work saves commuting time is remote workers save an average of 72 minutes in daily commuting time, with about half of that time spent on work, according to the University of Chicago study. So that tells us how much time they're getting back by not commuting, but it doesn't necessarily tell us, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Does that factor into the evenings and weekends work there? So again, one of those things where we're asking more questions after getting the information, but the benefit is that we are saving 72 hours or 72 minutes. 72 hours would be a lot. 72 minutes in daily commuting time. And if we tie another statistic into here that I like to talk about is, on average, each employee spends about 9.3 hours finding, searching, and sharing information within their own organization. So if we take that 72 minutes, I think they said that calculates to about 17 days throughout the year. And then you factor in having a better system by using Grapevine and our search capabilities and our document management, knowledge management features, then the employees can also gain back about 20 days. So now we're looking at about 37 days of time being invested back into an organization if you factor in commuting along with using Grapevine as your virtual headquarters. That's a lot of time, and just think about how you can leverage that whenever it comes to the working harder, faster compared to your competitors, right? So some of these things we got to call out. So that is a big benefit there. One, commuting time gives you time back. And two, if you have the right infrastructure, it's going to give you time back as well. All right, let's move to highlight number 6, which is remote or hybrid work options may help with employee retention. I don't know why they threw may in there, but let's see. Remote workers are 13% more likely to stay in their current jobs for the next 5 years compared to on-site workers, according to a survey by Owl Labs. This was one of the key highlights that I took away from this article, because we often hear about Gen Zers and even maybe millennials job hopping, right? I know that the average in some of these articles that I read is that the new average for employees to stay in a position is around 2 years. But what this article is saying that is, if remote or hybrid work options are offered, then employee retention could expand to around 5 years compared to on-site workers. That is significantly impactful for an organization, because if we think about turnover rates include cost, right? It's not just that we're having an employee leave, it's that we also have to fill in the gaps, and often that gap filling until we hire another person and enable them and get them trained up, that falls on your other employees. And whenever that falls on your other employees, they become stressed. And then it becomes a virtuous cycle of, okay, an employee leaves, these people are going to take on their extra work until we hire another person. They get stressed and burned out. Then they leave, and then these other people have to, and then it's just a rotating circular motion of attrition over and over and over again. Not to mention the cost that it takes to search, interview, hire, train, onboard, and then get them into the role that they were hired for, right? And then the other factor of this is the wealth of knowledge, legacy knowledge that someone might have, especially if these people are 10 years in the job or 5 years in the job. That's a lot of knowledge that you're going to be missing. Right now, Grapevine luckily offers or will offer a knowledge management system approach. So you get that information out instead of in that person's head, and it won't be as much of an uplift, but still, no matter what, it's going to be a huge impact. So that this if that doesn't excite people to think about having a flexible working policy or 100% remote policy or a mixture of both, which would be flexible, then I don't know what they're trying to see here, right? So that one was very important to me as I was reading this article. And then let's go into highlight number 7 to keep going on this. People of color and caregivers report improved well-being with remote work. So Black workers reported a 50% increase in their sense of workplace belonging and a 64% increase in their ability to manage stress when working from home, according to a study conducted by the Future Forum. Now, this is important because one of the things that we like about flexible work and remote work is that people of color, Black employees, Latina employees, Hispanic employees, and other style of employees that don't necessarily look like me benefit from remote and flexible work. And in the article, one of the things that they talk about is that whenever there's political unrest or there's a current event happening in the world that also connects, or we assume it connects that person's background to what's happening, they don't have to experience those hallways connections or those water cooler talks where they might experience microaggressions or just unknowledgeable comments or questions directed to them because of their skin color or their background or their heritage as it related to that current event or that political unrest, right? This is so important, and we're going to continue to get down the line of other demographics too, but this is what I really like about flexible work and remote work is that it becomes more equitable and diverse for companies to allow these people to have a safe space instead of dealing with microaggressions in the office. Even though that person who's doing it might think that it's a joke, it's not, right? And remote work allows those people to step back or step away and focus on their own well-being instead of having to have that type of conversation over and over again. So we talked about Black employees, people of color. Now we're diving into highlight number 8, which is mothers and caregivers report higher rates of well-being with hybrid work. So women, especially mothers and caregivers, reported improved well-being when given the option to work from home, according to a study by the University of Melbourne. And I'm going to go ahead and tie this into highlight number 9 too. Remote work has been a benefit for people with disabilities. So almost 2/3 of disabled employees believe they were more productive when working from home compared to the office or compared to working at an office, according to a study by the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. That's important for all these, right? For all the demographics that we've discussed, mothers, people of color, and then disabled people. Again, our mission at Grapevine is to build a world where work is more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling for all. And that's why we're pushing the future of work. We're pushing flexibility, because whenever we have flexibility, you're more likely to feel included. You're more likely to feel like you're equal to other people in the virtual office, so to speak. And these are things that we haven't been able to overcome in the physical location. But as we see in this article, we are seeing benefits because of the style of work that we choose. So remote workers have better well-being. If it's flexible, people have better well-being. And it's not just white people. It's not just knowledge workers. It's flexibility helps the majority of people, right? And so that's why that's important to call out. Now, the last one, number 10 here, is employees with flexible schedules tend to have better mental health. Workers with flexible schedules are less likely to experience daily anxiety, weekly anxiety, or anxiety several times a year, according to a study published in JAMA, J-A-M-A Network Open. So this is basically saying what I was saying just a second ago, which is people who, or employees specifically who have flexible work schedules, have a better mental health outcome or better well-being, right? And what we know through the data is that whenever you are more, I call it psychologically well, it's the science or social scientific name for happiness. Whenever they are happy or happier, they're more productive, up to 20% more productive. And in some studies, I've seen it go up to even 25%. So if we think about all of these benefits versus the cons, a little bit of the cons that we talked about, to me, as a founder myself, as a startup founder, these are way more important than having everybody in one physical location just so I can see if they're in their seats, right? And I say see in their seats specifically and not saying that they're productive, because that doesn't make sense. We've seen in the studies that if you bring your employees back into the office, it's not because you want to be more productive, because you're actually more productive at home. You have less distractions, you're able to focus and all that kind of stuff. And so this is something that we have to think about. And if you're one of the CEOs or founders out there really pushing for your employees to go back into the office, you need to ask yourself some of these questions, right? Like, what does the employee's work-life balance look like? And how is that contributing to the outcomes of their work, right? Do you care about the environment? If you do, what are you doing to offset your emissions, right? Is it you're going to be flexible? Is it you're going to go 100% remote? And then how are you tracking that too? Because that's another key thing, and that's a rising technology out there. And then for highlight number 3, because I'm kind of going through these in summary, is remote workers tend to eat healthier. How can you provide knowledge to your employees so they know how to be healthier and avoid those unhealthy habits? It's not going to be 100% accurate. It's not going to be 100% relative to everyone out there, but being able to give your employees a resource to leverage or to review is going to help them have better outcomes. And the healthier they are, the less likely that they're going to be absent, the less likely that they're going to be unproductive or less engaged. So those are all factors that tie into this, where I think sometimes whenever we talk about remote or flexible work, people often think, oh, people just want to be lazy, but that's not the case. They want to be productive, and they also want to have a life outside of work. So these are certain things that we have to think about to really have the best company in terms of retention, in terms of employee satisfaction, in terms of productivity, and the list goes on. Highlight number 4, remote employees work longer hours. This is a culturalistic thing for your specific company. How can you ensure that your remote employees aren't working longer than they need to, or it's not a consistent pattern, right? There's always that fires that we have to put out that maybe require us to work a little bit longer, but make sure that it's not consistent. And there's actually a law. Well, it's not a law yet, but in California, they pushed through something that said you might be able to get your boss in trouble if they reach out to you outside of working hours. So if you don't do it, it seems like a lot of people are taking these things into their own hands. Another one is the 4-day working week. We saw Bernie Sanders push this through, I believe it was the Senate, where they're trying to go down to a 32-hour working week. So these are things that we might have to adapt to no matter our thoughts on it. It's just going to be somewhere that we have to react to. So how are you prepared and setting yourself up to be prepared for whenever those things happen? Saves commuting time. That's kind of straightforward. Remote or hybrid work options may help with employee retention. Again, this was probably the biggest thing out of this article for me, where we see a lot of job hoppers around the average of 2 years. If we allow flexible or remote work, we could see that skyrocket to 5 years. Think about how much you could get done. Think about how much money you could save, and think about how you could help that employee grow in those 5 years instead of 2. And then the demographic parts, right? People of color and caregivers report improved well-being with remote. Mothers and caregivers report higher rates of well-being with hybrid work. Remote work has been a benefit for people with disabilities. And then employees just overall with flexible schedules tend to have a better mental health outcome. I mean, all these things that we talk about whenever we're talking about the future of work tie into the ability to get more done while also giving the employee a life to live, right? So to me, it's a win-win-win, especially whenever you add that key element, which is your foundation, which is the infrastructure that you provide and resources that you give to your employees, so they have the right knowledge, they have the right tools, and they have the right way of being able to work flexibly. So that is the Future of Work weekly report. I'm only going to focus on this one article because it's already a longer video. If we did another, then it would just continue. But one more time, go ahead and like and hit subscribe and share with any other future of work pioneers out there that you think would find this fascinating. And as always, we'll put the article in the show notes. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next Future of Work weekly report.